Welcome to Dallas Dirt. I'm April Towery. I am the Dallas City Hall editor for CandysDirt.com, and our guest today is Nathaniel Barrett. Nathaniel, tell us who you are and tell us about your interest in Forward Dallas, which we've been hearing about so much.
Well, sure thing. I'm Nathaniel Barrett. I work in commercial real estate. I do mostly leasing of industrial and office space. I also do some small adaptive reuse development here in Dallas. But perhaps most importantly for Forward Dallas, I was on the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee that voted to advance the approved plan over to the City Plan Commission for their further comment and review.
And y'all had a pretty intense process, the CLUP, they call it, the Comprehensive Land Use Plan Committee. I listened to some of those meetings and they went on for many hours and were really detailed. What was that process like?
I thought the process was great. There were about 15 members on the committee, and they brought a diversity of perspectives, everyone from current sitting city plan commissioners to people who work in the real estate industry to people who represent nonprofits or just community interest groups. So we had a really great discussion on almost every topic, and you were right, some of the meetings went for 6 hours or more as we tried to hammer it all out in the timeline that the staff was trying to get this plan released.
And why is that process so important? I think there were, dozens, if not 100 meetings on this particular comprehensive land use plan. Why put so much work kind of on the back end of getting this into a draft that's presentable to the public?
So comprehensive planning is something that's required by the state of Texas for any city that's going to adopt a zoning plan. So while the comprehensive plan for Dallas doesn't have any legal force in the sense that it changes zoning and what you're allowed to do with land, it does set the tone and plans out what the imagined future use is for our city. So it's designed not only to recognize what's in place today, but set the expectations as to what is going to happen in the future as we plan for where the city is going to go over the next 10 to 20 years.
So I'm sorry, you said it is required by the state of Texas to have a comprehensive land use plan.
This is true.
Okay.
Whether or not the city does anything with it at all is something else entirely. In fact, if you look in the city code, you will see a very short blurb in relation to zoning, and it says basically that the comprehensive plan is an advisory vision setting document and does not set zoning. And in my estimation, City Plan Commission has more or less ignored it since the last one passed. It has mostly only been referenced by staff during staff reporting.
And there's been some criticism that staff is trying to push a personal agenda or trying to create a more dense Dallas, a more walkable Dallas, a less car-centric Dallas. What happened here as far as misinformation or the mistrust for City Hall that we've seen?
Good question. Some people may have mistrust for the city of Dallas processes. There have been many times where things have not been transparent. I don't think this is one of those situations. All of the meetings are recorded and available for public review. People also attended in person, members of the public. And I think you'll see through the process, particularly as the first draft was released and we had discussion among the committee members, that we had a pretty clear discussion as to what direction we wanted staff to take. And this was done in a sober manner, recognizing some particular challenges that Dallas has recently been facing and will be facing in the future. And this plan is supposed to be able to address those problems. Two big ones that were identified, and you'll hear these themes come up over and over and over again during the discussion. One is what industrial zoning means in Dallas. A new thing that Dallas has encountered, like many cities over the last 10 and 15 years, is the kind of growth of large warehouse spaces. And you see lots of coverage about big warehouses being built. They create a lot of traffic, truck traffic, and that comes with some nuisances for neighbors, right? They kick up dust, or they tear up roads, or they just release particulate matter, and they're kind of ugly too. And then the other thing is the challenge of housing. and particularly over the last 5 years, and although it's a problem that's been growing for 50 years, is that the prices of housing has gone up a lot, and that's a concern for Dallas, the city, and is a current concern for DFW, the region as a whole. So the bulk of our attention as for the committee was focused on these two issues and trying to wrestle with the problem that we have in a way that is going to achieve the best outcome for the city and at the least kind of cost and downside for as many as we could.
In your opinion, and you are a real estate developer, what is the most efficient path toward more affordable housing for Dallas?
So affordable housing, and I don't use this as a income restricted, like affordable housing or a subsidized housing, or what I call capital A affordable housing. This is just housing affordability, broadly speaking. The two things that are most important for that are controllable at the local level are one, zoning, which says how much you are allowed to build of what, where. And the other is the building code, which says how you have to build what is built. So the city of Dallas has broad control over those two items, and this is an attempt to deal with that land use side of it, the zoning piece, this comprehensive plan kind of prerequisite to zoning. And we are trying to wrestle with the problem that we have a problem with housing affordability in Dallas, and if we can allow more housing in more places, then we will be able to maybe, if not make all housing affordable for everyone, at least reduce the cost of housing, or at least reduce the growth of the cost of housing.
And what about density?
Density is a part of that. There are some parts of town and it's very obvious where, because the land values are very high in some areas, and other areas they are not. There are empty lots in some places where you could build today that nobody is because the demand is not there. And there are places where the land values are many millions of dollars per acre, where people would very quickly love to build something, and they do when they get that opportunity. And you see those when rezoning requests come in, and they typically are in high value areas where you can earn the return you would need as a real estate investor to make building a multi-story building worth your while.
What are you seeing the narrative becoming in terms of Forward Dallas being a tool to put duplexes, triplexes, ADUs all over Preston Hollow? Long established.
Good question. There's been a bit of a conflation between the recent 5-signature memo, which was the request by some members of the city council to have a discussion about changing the definition of a single family zoning to allow up to 4 units on a single lot. That was something separate, but I would say related to this question of housing affordability. Comprehensive plan doesn't get to that level of detail. It talks about the idea that some areas may allow certain types of housing. And they've kind of been tied together a little bit by the people who are opposed to changes in what the single family has looked like has looked like up to now.
Do you think it's a valid concern that people are raising, that this is an attempt to reduce minimum lot sizes or bring higher density into their established neighborhoods?
Well, two things. One, I would never invalidate somebody's concerns, because just the fact that they say they have them is enough for me. Like I don't think that I say, well, those things aren't important. They're important to the person who said them, and I think they're important to, if I were in the same position, maybe I would feel the same way. On the other hand, when I and the other members of the committee sat down and said, here's the problem we face, an enormous problem, a problem that is not just in Dallas or in Texas, but this entire nation, of growing housing affordability problems, we said, what is the way we can accommodate and deal with this problem while creating the least amount of pain for everyone? Now, I think this is increasing density and broadly is the best way to do that. And you'll find the discussion was very robust in that area. And though I didn't even make the motion on the committee to consolidate the land use place types we have. They have industrial type place. They match up very similarly to zoning, but we imagine industrial uses happening in some areas, residential uses happening in somewhere. And the very, very first draft showed what was clearly a single family detached only type of area with places that might allow other types of residential dwellings, like duplexes or small apartments. And it was at the direction of the committee that we told the staff that we did not want to make a distinction between those two types of residential areas. One, because once you release that map, everybody will be fighting to be on the favored area, what people perceived as being protected. And two, that a recognition that the city is facing a problem together, and that while no area has to bear all of the change, nobody is exempt from it either. And I think, in my view, that is the way we can attack this problem without causing too much pain to any one group, and while still recognizing that there is a problem and that we're going to do something about it. Because when I look at the statistics in Dallas, particularly about the types of dwellings people live, you have more than half of the city of Dallas is a renter, and only about 10% of our residential land is zoned for any kind of multifamily usage. So when you've got more than half of the population living on a tenth of the land, I think we've kind of reached the limits of our current approach.
Well, you went to a District 14 community meeting, and I don't make it out to all of those, so it was great to have a reporter on scene telling us what was going on. And that was it hostile? Was it a little? What was that like?
So I attended that meeting because it was the closest. Although I live in District 2, but blocks away from District 14. The energy in the room was definitely hostile to the perception of what the plan was. I felt like Commissioner Kingston, Melissa Kingston, spoke and was leading the meeting along with some members of city staff. I feel like she did a great job of hearing everybody out, presenting it. She even started with a very realistic realization that she talked about land prices. She talked about costs of homes in the district. She talked about practical ways we could overcome those issues. Things went a little bit off the rails, as there was just started being a lot of people just start talking over what happened during the Q&A section. But I understand some people were upset with the plan and felt like they had the time to speak out about it.
What do you think Dallas can or should do to engage or rebuild trust with the public? Is it too late? I mean, they've said repeatedly on this podcast, this is not, we don't have an agenda here, and we're not trying to do X or Y or Z. We want a roadmap to guide future land use, and this is a thing that cities do, and it has the potential to create a better starting point when zoning cases go before the City Plan Commission. It doesn't have to be so contentious. Is there a way to sort of back out of that? I mean, can we make it right?
Well, that's a good question. I think staff has reached the limits of trying to explain away that this is not a zoning document, this is not changed. And so, because that just makes people suspicious that, well, if it's not changing anything, then why are we talking about it? I'm not on staff, and so I could be frank that it is supposed to lead to changes. It is supposed to lead to rethinking of the way we've approached land use, recognizing that the status quo is not up to the problem we have in front of us. So for me, the things that Commissioner Kingston point out, that we're talking about empty lots costing $500,000 and homes rapidly running up to $1 million in some of the zip codes in her district, is the correct approach. Is that we have to always start with recognizing that we have a problem, and what we are going to do about it as a city to accommodate not only the people sitting in the room who may be upset about changes, but also the people who people who are homeless, people who are moving to Dallas, people in the region who would like to be closer to their jobs or to their schools. How are we going to deal with that? And so starting with the problem and talking about solutions, I think, is the better approach, rather than trying to hedge and say, this is not a problem, nothing's changing, we'll keep having meetings about it.
Right. That's a good point. So why are we to think that this 2.0 version of Forward Dallas, that anybody's going to pay any attention to that?
Well, I think at best, my highest hope for it is that it sets the tone for the discussion, and will generate these kind of conversations we're having and set a realization that we are doing these plans not just for fun, and certainly not to ruin anybody's neighborhood, but to set the tone of discussion to say, we've got a problem, and here's the best way we know, both from technical and political perspective, to achieve the goals of achieving an affordable, equitable, strong, and environmentally friendly city. And this is the best way we know how to do it. And we all work together on this plan.
Now, from what you've seen, there was some criticism. Commissioner Kingston pointed out that there's a pretty aggressive timeline, even though this has been worked on for years.
Right.
That all of a sudden, it feels like all of a sudden, but it's not. We've been writing about this for years, and there have been meetings and webinars about this for years. But now they want the council to adopt this plan, or at least review it and start discussion in June. Do you think that's going to happen?
The trend is always for delay, especially if something picks up any kind of controversy. In fact, if everybody just voted on it right away on the first draft, I would feel like we didn't push enough to achieve the goals we were going for as a city. So whether it happens in June is going to be up to the city plan commission. I can't see what they're all thinking.
Talk to me a little bit about the place types, and there is one that is similar to single family residential, but it's a little bit broader and also offers for churches and schools and other things in that area.
Yeah, so I think the one we laid it on was something like a community residential. And the place types are imagined as places where not specific things will happen, but things could happen.
The Comprehensive Land Use Committee that you were on, y'all did take some action related to accessory dwelling units. Tell me about that.
Yes, so there are some specific recommendations for actions to take at the very end, and at very end of the plan. Among those was, because nowhere does it say in there said action item legalize 12 units on every lot, or one of the other, or 4 units on every lot. But there was one in the version I voted to move forward to allow accessory dwelling units on any lot. And the idea, that my perspective on that, is that the accessory dwelling unit an accessory dwelling unit as an accessory is another dwelling, a separate housekeeping unit that is on the same lot. So if a house with a garage apartment, or it could even be attached to the building as a small dwelling with a separate door that's just been sectioned off from the rest of the house, it's another dwelling on the property. And these exist in a lot of older neighborhoods. It's a lot of them in mine and in Old East Dallas generally. But my perspective is that the accessory dwelling unit is the smallest possible increment of housing from single family to anything denser than that. And as a city, if we can't allow an accessory dwelling unit, that means we can't allow any change. So I wholeheartedly voted for that, to allow accessory dwelling units, because what are we doing? We're saying nothing can change if we can't allow an accessory dwelling unit.
It's almost like the gentlest way to sort of start introducing opportunities for more people to live in an area.
Yeah, and lots of people have fond memories or stories about people, either they lived in accessory dwelling units, or they had, for whatever reason, somebody they know did, whether they were young and getting started out, or they were old and they were living with their kids on the property. There's a lot of good reasons for accessory dwelling units. Even if they were broadly legalized, I would not expect them to be built broadly, because it's kind of an expensive way to build housing. You build a 400 square foot accessory dwelling unit at a time is a lot more expensive way to build housing than apartments and such. But it is a good option for some people, and it is a very simple and straightforward option. So that's reason enough for me to say move it forward.
Tell us about parking minimums. ZOAC talked about this. You all said no parking minimums.
Yeah, so this whole discussion goes back to 2019, when one of the council members, Councilmember West, said, let's take a look at parking requirements, something that a lot of cities a few cities at the time had been doing, and since then, many cities have taken the same path. But basically recognizing that our approach to setting the required number of off-street parking spaces, a little bit of a niche topic, at that wonkish topic, is kind of we've taken the wrong approach over these years. And this is something that dates back in Dallas, like 60 or 70 years or so, and 100 years kind of nationwide, is that every use is attached to a certain number of required parking spaces, and that could be maybe one parking space per bedroom, or it could be one parking space per 100 square foot of restaurant. And so every use you can think of has some kind of requirement like that. And not only have we kind of discovered that has led to some negative outcomes, giant parking lots and that are empty a lot of the time because they're not adequate to the need. But it's just a flawed approach to protecting our streets from overflow parking in the first place. And so we at the ZOAC, and even before I was on it, back in 2019, 2020, and so on, directed staff to present a scenario where we removed all parking requirements from the city. And other cities have already beat us to the punch. Austin recently removed all of theirs, and San Francisco and Buffalo, New York. And so kind of coast to coast and coming down here and down south, it's the trend going around American cities these days.
What's the next step in that? Will the CPC hear it? Will it go before council? Or
next step would be for the CPC to hear it, and there could be some changes there because there was some other things attached to it, and there could be discussions about maybe taking a different approach. I think removing parking requirements across the board is the right approach, and they've given us the best outcome overall. But it is, understand it comes with it's very different than we've done it for the last 50 years. But sometimes different can be good. And this is one of those things that can be good.
All right. Well, this has been enlightening. And I really appreciate you joining us today, Nathaniel Barrett. And that is all for this episode of Dallas Dirt. We will see you next week.